Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are in Reboot, What It Means to Be a Woman Entrepreneur and Overcoming Cultural Barriers. I'm so glad you're here with us today. We've got a really exciting talk for you. This is the third event in the Woman Founders Track, led by Carmen Aramanda. And I'm going to be your moderator for this panel, and I'm joined with some amazing boss women, and I'm so excited for this discussion. So let's just hop right in. Let me just take a moment to introduce myself, and then I'll have each of our panelists introduce themselves as well. So my name is Bria Woods. I graduated from Trinity in 2016 with a BA in communication and a minor in film studies. And then I moved to London, where I pursued my master's in multimedia broadcast journalism. And so outside of work, I work at a TV station. I'm also a professional photographer, and I've had my work exhibited in galleries and currently in my first museum exhibition right now, which is really exciting. And I've been published both here in the United States and in the UK. And I also had the opportunity to start my first startup when I was at Trinity with the Trinity Entrepreneurship Department, and spoke at South by Southwest in 2017 about my venture at that time. So today we are really excited to talk about what it means to be a woman entrepreneur and overcoming cultural barriers. Each of our panelists have a unique story to tell, and I'm really excited for you to hear their story. And please note, you can jot down, if you have a question that you'd like to ask our panelists, please put it in the chat, and we will have some time reserved at the end of our discussion for questions. All right, so first, let's start with you, Erica. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about you?
Alrighty, my name is Erica. I graduated from Trinity in 2006 with a Bachelor of Science in Physics. I am currently a tutor with my company, Escalada Education Co. I'm the founder and executive director of my nonprofit, the Second Home School for Personalized Learning. Over time, I've actually been a soloist musician, and I actually did a little talk/performance for TEDx San Antonio in 2012. I've also spent time as a part-time painter, like a self-employed painter, and I also work on another project called Socialist Movie Night, where we talk about BIPOC revolutionary thought.
Okay, and Mary, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Ullmann-Japhet. I too am a Trinity grad. We've got the Trinity connection going on here today. I have Japhet Media. I started Japhet Media about a year ago. It's a public relations and media production company here in San Antonio. And I have a background in broadcast journalism, advertising, PR. And for the 18 years prior to starting my own business, Japhet Media, I was the senior VP of communications at San Antonio Sports, where I oversaw all of the marketing and communications for all of San Antonio sports programs, where the San Antonio Sports is the local sports commission in San Antonio. So Final Fours and USA Swimming Nationals and youth programs and health and fitness initiatives. So I've been in the community in San Antonio for a long time. Last year, I was the Trinity University Entrepreneur in Residence, which was a wonderful experience teaching bright students like you guys. And it was really fun. They taught me as much as I learned as I taught them, for sure. So I'm happy to be here. This is great.
Awesome, thank you. And Cristal?
Yes, hi. Thanks so much for having me. This is going to be an awesome panel. My name is Cristal Glangchai. I started my entrepreneurial journey in grad school. I was developing some nanoparticles for lung cancer tumor tissue delivery and started a nanotechnology company. From there, it led me to the Trinity connection. So I started the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Trinity University. Gosh, that was, I guess, back in 2010-ish. Since then, I started a nonprofit called Venture Lab that teaches youth entrepreneurship, specifically focusing on underserved youth and girls. So I'm the founder of that. My last entrepreneurial endeavor was writing a best-selling novel called Venture Girls, which once again is about empowering girls through an entrepreneurial mindset. And I'm just super excited to be here.
Wow. Okay. So as you can see, we've got a wealth of knowledge with us here today. So get those questions ready, get your notepads out, and let's dig in. So my first question, this is for all of you. One thing I've noticed in each of your stories is that education is a common thread for each of you. And so how would you describe the role that education and mentorship play in your work, especially in your relationship with other women?
I don't know who wants to go first.
Oh, I can go first.
Yeah.
I think, you know, with it, we as women see each other in different roles, and being teachers and educational facilitators, that's some of the first points, other than, you know, in our family, where we see other women in, you know, I guess you would say like leadership roles. And, you know, it starts pretty young. You know, if we're going to school, we're starting at 4 or 5. They're super important to ensure that you're doing kind of like a very holistic approach. You know, you learn to care about people that are educators, especially if they show that they care about you. And I guess, like, I don't have anything specifically profound, but, you know, you spend a lot of time with, you know, a lot of time and a lot of communication with people who are educators, you know, even if it's not like so formally. So it's important to have strong women, or women who show strong leadership skills, so that you like know what it looks like. You can have a good idea of like what you can expect out of other relationships, and also, you know, just to keep like the community kind of like intact, and keep very good like habits, and just like a good, I'm trying to say like a good feel, but like not not be like toxic and stuff like that.
Mentorship and, well, education are almost one and the same. You know, my mom was an elementary school teacher. My sister's an elementary school teacher. I didn't have that gene until I went to Trinity, and or until this last year, when I found myself in a professorial role as the entrepreneur in residence. But I think for most entrepreneurs, a constant sense of curiosity and a desire to learn is essential. And I have been very fortunate to have many people, men and women, encourage me along the way and be mentors, officially or unofficially. But I think the ones that have had the greatest impact are the women, because what's the saying? You need to see it to be it. And that matters an incredible amount when you're in a business world, when you're in education world, to see somebody who will lift you up and encourage you. And I mean, I've just been incredibly lucky. And I was in a field in sports, which is, you know, sometimes a little challenging for women. But my greatest role model there was Dr. Susan Blackwood, who led the San Antonio Sports Commission for so long. And she was very encouraging and believed very, very much in continued education and lifting women up. So I think I've had great role models, and I hope that I am a role model and love working with younger women to give back to, for the very reasons that people were so kind to me and lifted me along the way.
Yeah, and just adding on to what Erica and Mary said, definitely, you know, you have to see it to be it. And the idea that girls nowadays are getting all these messages starting at a young age, you know, saying, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't do math, or, you know, it's just lots of, I say, negative messages that are not empowering to girls. And so the idea is that we, as women entrepreneurs, we need more women role models showing these girls that they can do this. And I think it's really just that exposure, right? You don't have to sit there and have a formal education, but as long as you can expose them to this and say, hey, this is an option. I did it. You can do it too. I think that really opens the door and helps with this formal and informal education.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. You know, being able to see people who look like you in places where you never thought you would be welcome, it's just, it does something to the mind, and it just opens up your world and your horizons to see what's possible, you know? And I remember when I was at Trinity, I actually changed majors because I went in as a neuroscience major, and I graduated as a comm major. And there was a key moment where someone actually told me, you shouldn't do that, you know, because you know, comm majors might be seen as just, they might think that you're just a party girl, or you're not really taking college seriously. And it was really devastating, because I was like, wow, so should I only find my identity in one thing and not the other? Will people not take me seriously? Will I not be enough? And if it were not for some very key relationships that I made, especially with other women, including in the Trinity Entrepreneurship Department, did I get to see this is possible. If I'm really passionate and I'm willing to put in the work, it is possible. I can picture myself here. I can be here. And so I think, and that's where I really learned the value of mentorship, and educating and reaching back to open the door for those coming up after me, you know? And so now I want to dig into, I mean, the title of this talk is What It Means to Be a Woman Entrepreneur and Overcoming Cultural Barriers. So let's really unpack that. And can you guys share, what did you specifically have to overcome as a woman to even visualize and ultimately achieve the careers that you have? What were some of the barriers for you?
Well, I was going to say, just quickly off the top of my head, I mean, a barrier that you have to overcome is your own self-thoughts and own self-doubts.
Yeah.
I mean, my family, my dad had come from Mexico, didn't have much money, family of teachers. No one had ever really been an engineer or been a scientist. So growing up, I wasn't quite sure. I was like, well, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I can't do this. But luckily I did have some really good mentors. So I think it's really just overcoming your own sense of fear, your own sense of failure, self-doubt, and just really going out and trying something. And you're going to realize either how much fun it is, or maybe that you have to practice a little more to achieve it. But I really think it's those things that we tell ourselves in our heads.
I would agree. I think I got in my own way an awful lot early on in my career. Finding my own voice and finding that confidence that you're talking about is really important. Very fortunately, I had other people around me pushing and shoving and giving me that confidence when I didn't always have it myself. But you know, a little success begets more success, right? I mean, you start feeling it a little bit, and you realize, okay, the world didn't fall apart just because I spoke up first, or it's encouraging when you can stick your neck out, get out of your comfort zone a bit, and have that be rewarded. And it may not, people may not be throwing you a parade, but you find those little bits of success in yourself, and it gives you more confidence to take the bigger leap the next time. But it also takes a lot of shoving from behind as well. So, I mean, I was in media and sports, no one came recruiting me at Trinity. So it was not necessarily an area that women naturally went into. Media, yes, sports, not so much. But yeah, so there were some hurdles, certainly. But honestly, I think I was my biggest hurdle, at least out of the gate. Not so much anymore.
Yeah, wow. I mean, yeah, I can agree with all of that. And just to piggyback, we have those negative thoughts that have just been cycled through in our society. And so unfortunately, when we try to do something that's a little bit, you know, too big for our britches or whatever, we're like, oh wait, hold up, and you may get a little bit of that like imposter syndrome. But yeah, once you kind of like, well, can I test this? And then you see that, okay, the world didn't end. I'm fine. You know, you can keep going. And even with that, you know, as you work through your own, you know, getting rid of that voice that says, oh no, you know, you messed up. You gotta like, maybe you shouldn't do this. You know, there are people along the way. It's like, oh well, I appreciate you. You know, you're really helping us out. Okay, good. I'm glad somebody does see that. You know, and that's in spite of other people, you know, saying they need you to do something, and you're like, okay, and then they try to like undercut you, and it's just like, are you taking me seriously? You know, should I be taking myself seriously? So it is a lot of self-talk, but then you still get those kind of like, you know, that negativity that comes, but then, you know, you got to kind of like refocus, and then you got to listen to all those other people that have just been saying like, no, you're doing great, that's awesome. And you got to like tell yourself that, start believing it, and just keep going.
Yeah, I hear that kind of a common theme is moving out of your own way and just saying, I am enough, I deserve to be here. And for whatever reason, that is so hard. You know, it's so hard sometimes just to get to even that point and realizing that I'm just in my own way, and no, you know, outside of just showing up and doing the work. Sometimes it's just getting that thought loop activated in your mind. And that's something I've definitely battled in work, as an entrepreneur, just as a woman sometimes. And you, especially Mary and Cristal, you work in historically very male dominated industries. And, you know, we didn't have terms like microaggressions and intersectional diversity and inclusion, you know, even just 10 years ago. And so, do you have any examples to share where you felt like maybe you were being discriminated against or overlooked, or you were at the crossroads of intersectional, you know, where your race and your gender were coming together, and people were not seeing you for who you really are?
Oh, sure. I mean, who doesn't? Name me one woman who hasn't experienced that on some level. I've been certainly more fortunate than most, maybe, I don't know, but in my own experience, you know, I would say I haven't had a whole lot of many negative experiences, but in a newsroom, oh my goodness. I mean, come on, you know, it can be a little rough and competitive. And there were, and in general, and here's what I'm going to say. Women, stop apologizing. Don't say, oh, I'm sorry. You know, that's one of my things. And don't volunteer to take notes in the meeting. You know, there's this like natural thing about, oh, she'll take the notes in the meeting. It's like, no, she's the vice president of whatever, you know, no, she's not. But there were many times like that where there was an assumption that, oh, she'll mother everyone, or she'll organize, or she'll take care of that, when no one was looking around at the guys who were younger and less experienced than me to do that very same thing. So I think there were, you know, certainly in a newsroom, which can be pretty brutal sometimes, also wildly creative and loads of fun. You know this, Bria. And in the sports world, in the upper echelons of management, it's mostly guys still. We're making great strides, huge strides, on the field, on the court, in the boardrooms, in the executive areas, but it's all new. You know, everybody's still kind of like the first in their area to get there. So yeah, there were definitely times where there was just an assumption that I was not at the level I was, or that I was going to take care of something that is a typically woman role. I don't know. And it would shock people once I finally got, you know, my confidence up to go, no, I'm not going to do that. Someone else can do that, surely. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say similar experiences on the tech side. So when I was studying mechanical engineering, I think there were only 5 girls out of about 600. Then in grad school doing my PhD. So the interesting thing is only about 0.1% of PhDs in STEM are Hispanic, and only 0.06% are Hispanic females. So I was definitely an outlier in that area. I remember trying to commercialize my technology and trying to start my company. And one of the officers in the Office of Technology Commercialization kind of just flat out said, well, I think you're a young girl and I don't think you can do that. And so I've heard that quite a bit. But I would say that always, it kind of lights a fire under me. And I'm like, you think I can't do this? And that really pushes me to the next step. So I'd say I had a lot of experiences like that where someone's like, well, I don't really think you can do this. And that just totally drove me to kind of work even harder and show them that I could. I do think now, kind of like Mary was saying, I think in all fields, there's a lot more female representation, which is great. But yeah, definitely a lot of moments like that.
And Erica, I know that you have a project called Socialist Movie Night that really seeks to highlight Black and Indigenous people of color and the way they think. And so would you like to speak to any situations or do you have any stories to share about dealing with microaggressions or feeling overlooked, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think I had briefly touched on it earlier with not in my mind at the time, somebody's asking me, for example, for tutoring, and I say, okay, well, this is my rate, and they're like, okay, well, how about you do it for this rate and you come out here? And I'm like, first of all, you're asking me to do, my work for a reduced rate, which I never said I was going to do, and then you're asking me to go really far, and it's just kind of people expecting a lot. And I think, Mary, you had talked about, it's like, oh, the woman's in the room, she's going to take the notes, and I'm kind of thinking, like, you're expecting me to just, because women tend to be the caretakers of kids, I'm just going to do this for like not what I feel like my time is worth. So I didn't appreciate that. I had another situation, and now I'm thinking, that's probably because somebody's not taking me seriously because I'm a woman trying to do this. When I was talking to a man about just being a studio musician, he was like, no, you can't do that way. It just doesn't work like that here. And this was in San Antonio at the time. But I'm not the first woman to want to be a studio musician. So why are you telling me it doesn't work like that? He just really wanted me to do this one role that he wanted me to do. And I'm like, why are you expecting me to do that? As far as, you did mention Socialist Movie Night. I haven't had any problems like face to face with that, other than people coming on the page and saying stuff, and I'm like, what are you doing? This is not what we're about. I think you need to like respect the space a little bit. And speaking on that, it is Black, Indigenous, people of color. We did do a feature on the women's community in Rojava, which was really interesting. They're running the whole thing, and it's peaceful and really nice up there.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said, Erica, about people sometimes trying to put women or especially minority women in a box. And it's like, we're expected to perform a certain way or to just be a certain way. And if we try to step out of that, we're perceived as being rebellious with no grounds, or just being out of touch, out of line. And people love to hit us with that. Well, that's just not how it's done, or we've always done it this way instead. So if you could just fall back in line, that'd be great. And it's really frustrating that you know, I've also been in rooms where I walked in and before I could just be Bria, I was the woman in the room or the Black woman in the room. And I felt like I could just feel that there were assumptions already being made about who I am before I got to say who I am for myself. And sometimes that can be really frustrating because it's like, I just want to be a part of the team. You know, I really just want to be a part of what makes whatever we're working on great. And sometimes I feel like there's been some moments where I had to kind of educate or talk people through how we can work together in a more productive way and allow me to just be me, just be a person. But it is interesting how in certain situations, people just want to project their worldview on you without even giving you a chance, you know? Now, let's talk about family, because sometimes it's those closest to us that are the hardest to convince to support us and be on our side. And so did you, throughout any portion of your journey or education, were your parents, were your family, were your friends, were they supportive? Did they not support you? Were they coming against you? Did they try to discourage you in any way?
I've been very fortunate. I mean, both of my parents, my dad was a rancher and a home builder. My mom, as I mentioned, is an elementary school teacher. So, you know, we didn't come from, you know, great wealth or anything like that, but education was always incredibly important. And they were very encouraging. I grew up in a teeny tiny town in South Texas and, you know, very supportive environment in general. And I think I hit the jackpot with parents. I totally lucked out with it. And I have one sister and, you know, so it was a very fostering environment. I was very fortunate and loads of aunts and uncles who are just kind of like, oh, there's Mary, you know, but in an encouraging way. So it was definitely great. I am blessed, certainly, to have had that experience because I know it's not everyone does, certainly.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I feel very, very fortunate. I always say that my parents gave me an immigrant mindset, which I call an entrepreneurial mindset, which is about really just working hard, following your passions, being curious. I mean, my parents didn't know anything about technology, but they were always buying me, you know, the little science kits. My dad would have me, you know, working on the car engine, changing the oil, fixing up the house. So it was really, I'd say, a hands-on childhood. And instead of like getting in trouble for getting dirty or getting in trouble for taking things apart, it was more like, okay, let's see how it works and then put it back together. So I feel very fortunate. And I would say sometimes I kind of surprise them, like with things that might be a little risky, or when I went back to grad school, they're like, oh, are you sure you want to leave a nice paying job to do that? But I always, I just told them, I'm like, this is what I'm passionate about. I'm going to make it a success. And they supported me. Sometimes they were surprised, but they were always very supportive.
Well, I had some good moments with family. Mine's a bit fractured. So when I was young, I was given a lot of things to play with and tinker with. So, and it was very, I'll say in a way, non-gendered because I had dolls, but I also had bricks and little like car sets. I had instruments and stuff, and so I think like kind of my base is very non-binary in a way. Um, so I'm really grateful for that. It's just not until I got older, and I'm kind of gonna maybe blame it on my dad a little bit. He's an art professor, and he says artists don't like to be told what to do. So, of course, when I spent time alone with him, I started getting a little bit of that anarchist type last thing stuff. And my mom was really, I think, concerned about doing things. You know, like we were talking about society and the status quo, doing things a certain way. So, you know, when I went to undergrad, it's like, yeah, cool. And I'm like, I don't know. I just wanted a job and play music, you know, because artists don't like to be told what to do. But I majored in physics. I'm like, hey, it's hard. I'm not going to pay for an education unless I'm doing something hard, so let's do it. But even then, I was thinking about majors, and my mom was like, no, you should do this. And I just can't. I can't do that. And I got to the point where I kind of would do something and then be like, hey, y'all, this is what's happening. Because I just like didn't want to deal with whatever. I think my dad was a little bit more receptive to me kind of, oh, I want to try this. I want to try that. Try that. And my mom really wanted things to kind of be in a certain way. I think she was trying to like maybe play it safe. But unfortunately, I don't always play it safe. So here we are.
And I was gonna say, I really like what you said about kind of like the non-binary. And I feel like I was kind of raised that similar way. I mean, I think for the longest time, I didn't see the difference between boys and girls because I played on the boys' soccer team and I wrestled, and I just never really grew up seeing a difference probably till I got to junior high.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I wonder where my entrepreneurial spirit came from. And honestly, if I just think about it for a minute, it's pretty easy. It's my dad. You know, he was a rancher and he was a home builder, and you know, we didn't come from a tech background. You know, there was no Bill Gates in our family, but I learned from him that if you have a passion for your work and you get up and work hard every day, then you're going to be fine. So, you know, in career transitions through my life and starting my own business, this is my second one that I started. I was never, I mean, I was excited, but never afraid. And I think that I'm incredibly grateful to my father for having instilled that in me without him ever trying. He just led by example. I just watched him get up early and go to work and work hard every day and have a passion for what he did. So it was that's a really great lesson for a little girl to learn from her daddy. Yeah, I think when I try to encourage all the men in my life, my son included, who's hopefully not a dad for a very long time. But, and yes, I have a son and a daughter, 22 and 20. And, you know, just be a good role model for the kids around you. And dads and daughters, that really makes a difference. I think it does.
Yes, I think there's a common theme here. So any parents listening, take note. I think what I'm hearing is, you know, nurturing the natural born interests and passions that your child has and not dissuading them based on, certainly not based on any, you know, gender stereotypes or gender norms, and allowing children to just explore. I was also afforded a similar childhood where my parents were just always there. Always. My mom is watching right now, you know, like always there to encourage me and support me and allow me to be curious. Whenever I asked a question, they didn't lie or shy away from it. They would give me an age appropriate answer. And then as I got older, we would, you know, give me the next level, into adulthood to understand the world around me. And, you know, that another thing I notice about all of us is that we've explored so many things, you know, and I think having a supportive base is so healthy, because most people will go through many careers throughout their lifetime. You know, that also took me a long time to realize that there's no like perfect one dream job.
Right.
There can be a skill set that I return to frequently that can manifest in different positions. But in terms of the actual positions and jobs and roles that I'm fulfilling, that they can be very varied. But I think people who can have a firm base, a firm foundation to spring off from, whether that's family, friends, people in a new city that they're living in, who can encourage them to go for things, and don't be afraid to be a beginner again. You know, even it doesn't matter how old you are, don't be afraid to just be a beginner and try something for the first time and just go for it, learn as much as you can. And so I can definitely appreciate that. Everything from ballet when I was a little girl, all the way to biomedical research in high school and journalism, photography. I've always had, I'm very grateful to have always had a cheer squad, you know, that said, if that's really what you're passionate about and you're willing to work for it, then you can do it. that makes a huge difference.
I think you got to look for those supportive groups wherever you can find them. Not everybody is fortunate to have very supportive parents. Okay. But, and I see this even in San Antonio's entrepreneurial ecosystem. There are wonderful organizations filled with incredibly helpful people for female entrepreneurs, male entrepreneurs, but Geekdom, great resource for entrepreneurs. Tech Block, great resource. I mean, there are so many things, even with the city, the various universities. There are people who are quite willing to be sounding boards, mentors, friends, uplift you through your journey, your entrepreneurial journey. And I think entrepreneurship to me is as much a mindset as a thing. Everybody, in fact, this was something I really saw when I was teaching at Trinity, because I was teaching the entry-level entrepreneurship class. A lot of those students they thought they had to be the next Steve Jobs, next Bill Gates. When you realize it's what you're trying to get at first and foremost is that entrepreneurial mindset. And how do you develop that? Well, you kind of have to look around for resources. And I think it is something that can be, for a whole lot of us, it's innate, but it can also be fostered and developed. And kind of going back to what we said from the get-go is you got to see it to be it. And you got to be around folks, put yourself in those positions to be fostered, to learn, and then give back when it's your turn.
I don't know if we have time, but I wanted to add on to that because I really like this thread. I would say too, and what I notice with a lot of my students too, and just people who come to me for mentorship, a lot of times people are afraid to ask other people to mentor them. But I would say totally don't be. Like, take that initiative, write that note on LinkedIn, get a connection to that person. Because I would say most of us are willing to mentor people, to answer questions, to help with their expertise. So really just go out there and look on LinkedIn, look through your network, look through them, find someone that you're like, hey, I'd really like to learn from them, or maybe they can help me. Just go out and don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask for mentorship or help. You need a team to help, build yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And going back to something that you said, Mary, I 200% agree. Like, when we're trying to, when we're navigating, we're making so many choices every single day. And when we're trying to navigate through that, it's like, you can't do that alone. You need a team. You need to allow yourself to be mentorable as well. It's a two-way street. It's a matter of communication and understanding that there's a bit of give and take. And again, not being afraid to be a beginner, not being afraid to mess up. And like you said, I too was one of those people that got caught up thinking, oh my gosh, if my tech startup isn't some major success story that gets me on like Forbes 40 under 40, then it's not worth pursuing. And that's a really dangerous way to think, because I felt like I was viewing every choice that I had to make through that lens and thinking, if it's not going to help me get to that level, then I'm not going to do it. And that's not going to lead to any sort of success, I learned. Ultimately, I feel like what's at the heart of an entrepreneur is someone who desires to solve a problem for their community, for the region, their state, whatever, for whatever group of people that needs that problem solved. And sometimes I feel like the narrative around entrepreneurship is all about vanity and glamour and status, which can be a byproduct, but that should not be the soil that you're trying to water, because it's not fertile and it's very volatile. And so I'm so glad you said that, because that is something I would impart to anyone listening, anyone who's starting a venture, is like, always stay focused on your why, and understanding that most of the entrepreneurial journey is not pretty, but it doesn't mean that you have to do it alone. mentorship is there, community is there, finding that those people or that person that can cheer you on and remind you that you are the person for this, and this is why you're doing it, and these are and I think also fostering a relationship with the people that you're serving, the people that you're solving a problem for, helps you to remember your why. I wanted to read a comment that came through. Someone who's watching said, both of my parents are Vietnamese refugees, so they harped that we needed secure jobs and career paths like a doctor or an engineer. And then I chose to major in advertising. So I feel like nature came into play for me to choose a path that wasn't safe. And she said nature, meaning when I went to college. That's really, wow. Yeah, that's a big one, because when I lived in London, you know, most of my classmates were from other countries, and maybe their family, and some of the friends that I made, maybe their families had immigrated to the UK at some point. And one thing I have learned is that, you know, some immigrant parents really kind of push this, like, doctor, lawyer, engineer, those are your options. And a lot of my friends who are now working in creative industries it's still a long journey trying to help their parents understand that there is a stable life to be had in something outside of those career paths. I know, Cristal, you said that your parents immigrated from Mexico. Is that something that you battled with growing up?
Well, so my dad came from Mexico. The thing that I think was interesting is I feel like kind of we talked about our dads were the ones pushing us to be a little more risk-taking. I will say he did really push me towards STEM, like science, technology, engineering, and math. But I would say when I told my parents I was going to start a company, that's when they got a little nervous when I first said that, you know, I left my high-paying job at 3M and I was going to go off and do something completely new. I think that's when they got a little bit nervous, but I don't know. I didn't have too much of. They really kind of let me do what I was passionate about.
What about you, Erica? I know that, especially in the POC community, Black women, we can be incredibly risk averse sometimes. And starting a business or a venture does not fall into that risk averse category. And so did you struggle with that, or did people around you, were they nervous for you at any point?
You know, there's a lot of stuff looking back on having to kind of start my own business was more of a necessity rather than like, I'm going to go try this, you know. Um, I have ADHD and other specified anxiety disorder, and I didn't find that out until last year. So there was a lot of things over the years that didn't quite click. And not just that artists don't like to be told what to do, but like, and by the way, I'm like non-medicated, and I try to focus on letting my brain do what it wants to do, but also reining it in. It just at one point in time, I couldn't rein in a lot of stuff the right way, and I always had ideas, you know. So you know, entrepreneurs, we trying to solve problems, have ideas. Being that my brain was going and I was having these ideas and I was working for somebody that wasn't receptive to those ideas, it was really hard to like feel fulfilled in whatever career that was. And if I was to put all those things aside, you know, I would either not have a job or I would have to put those things aside and get like a higher paying job. So kind of being an entrepreneur was a way to, eat and pay my bills, but also to not feel so stifled. Um, and being that nobody really realized that, you know, my parents are still kind of like, oh, ADHD just means you can't focus. And I'm like, oh, there's some other things going on there. That wasn't tapped into, until recently. There was a lot of like, oh, no, you need to do the safe thing, you know, watch out for this and this and this. And I'm like, my brain is not wrapping around that. So I kind of just had to do that. And you know, like we're saying, like the family was kind of fractured. I also, you know, have social anxiety and stuff. And so I didn't really start getting like a tight group of friends that are like, you know, friends until recently. So it's kind of like me just figuring stuff out. And I just had to kind of do it. Otherwise, I'm going to be exhausted and, having, just not feeling good about stuff and just feeling like down and depressed. So I just kind of had to do something to kind of make myself feel okay, but also solve, like, a social problem. Kids need help at school, so they need tutoring, you know, and we're seeing kids, like we're talking about, not necessarily being encouraged, or people are like, no, you got to do it this way. So, founded a nonprofit, maybe I can, help people learn those things that they want to learn, that, not everybody is telling them that, yeah, it's okay to learn.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Erica. And that reminds me, mental health is something that I think we're still destigmatizing and learning to be more comfortable discussing, especially where entrepreneurship and professionalism is concerned. Does anyone else want to touch on that?
I will say that, a lot of studies have shown that, I forgot what percentage of entrepreneurs have dyslexia, but a very large percentage of entrepreneurs have dyslexia. Also, people that are think in different ways, so having ADHD or having to overcome different hardships, a lot of them become entrepreneurial as well. My daughter actually struggles with ADHD and depression, and so I've done a lot of learning and trying to understand how her brain works and how she learns best. And I do think this is where teaching kids an entrepreneurial mindset as well as personalized learning can really help bring out the best in those kids.
I think sometimes we have just too narrow a definition of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And if you've got the drive, the idea, you found a problem that you want to solve and think you have a unique solution, go for it. It's just because, I sometimes stopped early on and thought, well, am I really an entrepreneur? I'm starting a PR and media production company. It's not a, software company. It's not a super tech company, biotech company. And then, and actually, good friends in this space have said, yeah, you're starting something from, you're starting something new. It's an entrepreneurial mindset, again, as I say. So it's the desire to create. It's the desire to learn. It's the desire to be yourself. I think what we were talking about earlier is you get kind of frustrated with where you are. I probably could have started this, my most recent venture, a year or two earlier. And I don't know why. I just kind of got a little stuck. I never looked back really particularly, but for me, it might have been a little insecurity. But once I did it, it was like, oh my God, why didn't I do this 2 years ago? So I would say, push yourself, let people push you, and just recognize that we're all so very different and come at it from different ways. But if it's in you, it's in you, and you've got to let it out. Otherwise, it can get ugly.
I love that. Absolutely. You have to let it out. And sometimes, one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've heard is like that idea that keeps coming up over and over and over again. Sometimes it's in your dreams. Probably you should explore that. Maybe you have no idea what the first step is, but especially in San Antonio, there are a ton of resources. I know that 1 Million Cups used to be a huge resource for me. Geekdom, Trinity University Entrepreneurship Department. There are people and places in San Antonio that can help you to at least point you in the right direction. Yeah. So don't feel like you have to be an island and figure it out on your own, because it's not how you'll succeed anyway. So reach out, ask questions, We have one more question from our audience. So Andrew says, societally, many people are happy with the current situation, being girls in the home, taking care of children, etc. If one girl is successful and independent, that might lead to another. Some people see that as a loss and they might be destructive. So how do you address that problem in society? What are your ideas to address that in society?
Wow, I was going to say that's a really big one. I don't know if we can address all of it. I would say one of the routes that I have taken to address this problem was kind of one of those ideas I had in my head that I had to get out, and that was my book, Venture Girls. And I wrote it for parents because I wanted all parents to understand how to give girls an entrepreneurial mindset. So kind of like we've been talking, not necessarily about starting a company, but having that confidence, showing that they can solve problems, showing that they can use their strengths to create things. And for me, I think it's really about educating those parents about the benefits. And once the parents see what these girls can create and what they can do, that kind of usually I've seen that turn them around. So from my perspective, that is the one method that I've tried, and I think it's working. I think it's going to take a long time to get there, but I think it is about educating the parents and showing them how important an entrepreneurial mindset for girls is.
Cristal's book is fabulous. Buy it and give it to parents and little girls. I'm just going to tell you right now, my daughter has a copy.
Thank you.
She's an engineering major too, so it's stuck.
Excellent. Does anybody else want to add anything or share anything before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just to piggyback on what Cristal said, yeah, it's a part of, we're talking about education. Girls having an entrepreneurial mindset doesn't mean that they're never going to have anything to do with the family. There are so many social problems that you can solve with just having that creativity. I mean, they could have an entrepreneurial mindset and then figure out something to make the lives of families easier. Or helping single moms who happen to have an entrepreneurial mindset, helping your community, and it's not that, oh, well, you're going to start a company, you're not going to be a parent. Well, you can be a parent. And I mean, you can be a parent in different ways. You can do fostering and you can do adoption. And there's just, I think I don't like to say there's so many problems that can be solved because it sounds bad, but there's so many ways to find like intersectionality in with that mindset and creating things, and also really just bringing it all together and bringing the community together, and just like, another thing we got to work on is that women don't need to solve the whole family problem by themselves. Plenty of societies are very communal anyways. So if they're able to solve problems, bring the community in, everybody's going to be doing the mentoring and the fostering of other entrepreneurs and young people. And so if we're all working together, I think we can all like rise together and get our goals met.
Erica, I love that. So basically like parenthood and entrepreneurship is not mutually exclusive. And I mean, Mary, you have 2 kids. I've got 4 kids. You can be a woman, you can be an entrepreneur, and you can be a mom. It is a lot of work. But like Eric was saying, there is help. There is family, relatives, babysitters. Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. It's looking for the creative solution in whatever the problem might be. And those of us who kind of think that way, need to be celebrated, and we need to find all the folks who are listening to this and out there who have that little nudge in them, and encourage it and celebrate it and bring it on out. We need more of you.
Absolutely. One of the things I saw in the beginning of the pandemic is that a lot of women-owned businesses were closing or, being put on hold because suddenly they realized, maybe I don't have the spouse I thought I had, or the help that I thought, that I now need to be able to make this all work. And so what I'm also noticing is a return in some communities to more communal living. I've seen in one of my friends, she's a mother of 4, and her youngest just started 1st grade. And she texted some of her other mom friends and said, hey, I've got a spare bedroom that I turned into a classroom for the girls. If you guys need to go to work or need to go run errands during the day, you can drop them off here. I'll help them, because they all go to the same school. So she said, I can help them log on and get their homework in and, do the virtual school thing. And a lot of those kinds of conversations we were not having before this pandemic. And so again, we're not islands. We can't do it on our own, but that doesn't mean that we can't do both. So it really is about knowing who's on your team, who do you have around you that can help you make all of this work, the venture, the home life, marriage, the relationships, everything. I think, and I'm excited about that. I think communal living is the way to go. Things are better in community anyway.
I would say, I feel like that is a good thing that's come out of the pandemic. I mean, I've gotten so much closer to family, to my neighbors, helping with kids, like groceries. I don't know. And I've gotten to meet my neighbors, and we've all realized that there's a bunch of women entrepreneurs, and we were always so busy traveling, going to work, that we never actually got to stop and talk and support each other. So I've seen that as well. And I think it's really great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so very much, ladies. Before we go, I want everyone to know, please reach out to all of us. Again, we are a community. As you can see, they've just shared a wealth of knowledge, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Obviously, they have a whole career of knowledge and experience behind them. So please reach out, ask questions, talk to us offline as well. Why don't we just go around? Do you guys want to share where people can reach you or find you?
Sure. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm M.Japhet, Japhet, or you can just find me, Mary Ullmann-Japhet, on LinkedIn.
Yeah, if you want to go to LinkedIn, my name's kind of hard. Luz Cristal Glangchai. Maybe if you just type in Glangchai, you'll be able to find it. And I think, on Twitter, I am at Luz Cristal 23.
I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to think, most of my other stuff are my pages. On Facebook, they can Escalada Education Co., the Second Homeschool for Personalist Learning, and then Socialist Movie Night. Probably the easiest way where I can bring in those messages and answer your questions.
So get connected with all of these wonderful women. You can find me on, you can find me on LinkedIn, Bria Woods, and also on Instagram. You can find my photography page, Bria Woods Photography. So again, thank you all so much for joining us and for your amazing questions and participation. And please enjoy the rest of San Antonio Startup Month. We have a whole another week and a half of events and talks, and you can find everything on the schedule on sasw.co. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.